Hi, it's Dr. Jan with some wise words to work with. And today I want to talk to you about empathy and sympathy, what the differences are, and why empathy is so important to have in the workplace to get rid of toxicity and bullying and to create a culture where there's workplace wellness. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. First off, I want to say that empathy and sympathy, oftentimes those words are used by people who don't really have a clear understanding of the distinct differences, and they're used interchangeably, and they're not the same. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with sympathy and talk about what that is and how that might come across in the workplace, and then we'll talk about empathy. Sympathy is, again, when you have compassion for something that somebody went through, okay? You tend to take more of a detached point of view when you understand that somebody has been through something, and you feel pity, and you often feel sorry for someone that has been through something. And sometimes sympathy can come across as being a little condescending, and also it can come across as victim blaming. Okay. So for example, people have sympathy. I almost said feel sorry, but that's, oftentimes sympathy and feeling sorry for someone are the same thing, and they're interchangeable. So sometimes people feel sorry for me or have sympathy or have pity for me because I've been a victim of workplace bullying. But attached to that sympathy often comes a very condescending point of view, as if I'd done something. For example, it's victim blaming. People tend to believe, even in this day and age, that in the workplace somebody has done something and they deserve that, and so they feel sympathy for me, but they don't understand what I've been through. They feel sorry for me. Okay. And that's really what sympathy is. It's where you can have compassion and you can understand kind of what someone's been through, but you have a detached point of view. It's often very condescending, and you have pity and you feel sorry for someone. Okay. So let's talk about how sympathy comes across in the workplace. Okay. And so I'm just going to give you some examples and talk about my own experiences of having people feel sympathy for me in the workplace. Okay. And this still happens a lot when I'm presenting and talking to people about my experiences with workplace bullying. People tend to feel sorry for me that happened. And so what people will say are things like, well, did you try this? Did you try that? Right? So when they say things like that, that comes across as being sympathetic, as if I didn't report, as if I didn't try to talk to the bully, as if I didn't do all of these things to try to reconcile the situation. Okay. And that's victim blaming. When you say to me, oh, I understand that you're a victim of bullying, that's terrible, but have you tried all of these other things to kind of reconcile the situation? You're showing me sympathy. And again, what that does for a victim, for someone like myself, is it enhances the shame. Okay, because now you have said to me, well, the bullying might have stopped, or maybe it will stop if you did A, B, and C. Okay. And what that kind of sympathy does is it enhances the shame and guilt and the embarrassment that I'm already feeling about being a victim of workplace bullying. So sympathy often enhances those feelings that the person is already feeling, and you are basically shining a big bright light on it. Okay. So it doesn't help the person. In many ways, sympathy hurts the person. Okay. And so when people feel sorry for me about being a victim of workplace bullying, oftentimes what they're doing is making me feel worse about it, not better. Okay. So what's empathy? So empathy, again, and sympathy are not the same thing. Okay. So empathy is understanding where someone has been and walking in their shoes and feeling what they're feeling, or at least getting a good idea of how it might have felt to be in that person's shoes when something has happened to them. Okay. So, for example, if you think about it visually right now, okay, if you want to be empathetic about my experiences of what it felt like to be a victim of workplace bullying, visualize yourself literally stepping inside of my shoes and looking out at that experience through my own lens and viewpoint. Okay, that's empathy, is being able to see those experiences through my eyes. Okay, not looking down at me or shaming me via sympathy, but looking out what it was like to have your colleagues call you names behind your back. What must that feel like? That's empathy, okay? And the difference is you can feel what I felt when you practice and feel empathy, okay? You're not looking down on me. You're getting a better understanding of what exactly I was experiencing. So empathy, again, is understanding where someone has been and also what it feels like. And the reason that's different than sympathy, again, sympathy is where you can take a detached point of view. When you have empathy for someone, you're more willing and understanding of their experiences, and you want to offer support. You don't necessarily, and you oftentimes can't fix what's happening to them, but you can understand what they're going through and offer support and not be judgmental. So empathy is a non-judgmental point of view because you're understanding how I'm feeling, what that must be like. And so when somebody is empathetic towards me about my experience, they will say things like, I'm really sorry that happened. I understand what that must be, what you must feel like. It must have been horrible to be treated like that by your colleagues. So people who are empathetic listen attentively. They hear what you are saying, okay? And you know that because they will repeat some of the things that you've said back. I can't believe that your colleagues sent you those emails. That's terrible. That must have been really hard. How'd you handle that, Jan? Right? Those are things that we might say empathetically to someone. But listening attentively and confirming and affirming what the person is saying is part of empathy. Okay. So when you say to somebody, well, did you try reporting? That's not empathetic listening. Okay. Empathetic listening is hearing the fact that I reported several times and that made the bullying worse. Okay. And though it's really important to respond and with empathy because that's makes people feel better. Okay. The entire time I experienced workplace bullying, the only people that believed me, what I was going through, were the people who were also going through that. The other targets of workplace bullying in my workplace, okay? My own family and my friends didn't believe me, okay? They were not empathetic. They were sympathetic because in what I know now is, first off, they didn't believe that it was as bad as it was. And they thought that probably I was doing something to enhance and make those things worse. Okay. And so empathy is about providing support and understanding and believing what the person is saying. And that's so important to have when you are working with somebody who's a victim of workplace bullying, because they are in an environment where nobody believes them from the bottom all the way to the top. And many times they are being made to feel shameful for trying to get the bullying to stop. And there's no empathy in the workplace. So why don't we have empathy for our colleagues? I think it's oftentimes when you're in a helping profession, you're taught to have empathy for your client and you never have any discussions about empathy for your colleagues. So that's a simple solution, is academics can start teaching that to students, having empathy for your colleagues, okay? But the other thing is first off, It's a learned behavior. Bullying and toxicity, being a bully in the workplace, again, yes, sometimes you can have character flaws, but the large majority of people who are bullies in the workplace, that's a learned behavior. That's because it gets them power and control. It's a tool and a mechanism to cover up their own insecurities and, yes, lack of emotional intelligence. So people who aren't able to feel or display empathy in the workplace have a lack of emotional intelligence, because empathy is a high-level skill. You have to learn it. It's not ingrained in us. We're not born with it. It's a skill that we are taught. Some of us were taught as children to be empathetic because we had parents like myself who role modeled empathy, and I learned that. And that's why then I can be empathetic to both my colleagues and my clients and my friends and my family, is because I had good role models for that. And I also have self-reflection skills. But people in the workplace who don't have empathy have learned how to cover up their insecurities through bullying. Bullies have a lack or a low emotional intelligence where they don't feel like they have to be empathetic because they can get power and control through bullying. And oftentimes that, again, not oftentimes, 100% of the time, bullying is a learned behavior that people learn to get ahead through abusing their colleagues. And so they don't feel empathy, because if they really had a good understanding of what it felt like or what their behavior, the impact it was having on someone, they might actually stop. And so they don't show empathy, is because then they're not responsible for their own behavior. They might have sympathy, but they victim blame and they justify what they do as a means to elevate themselves in the workplace. And so that's why it's so vital that we teach people, I don't care where you're working, the skills to be empathetic for our colleagues, to understand how our behavior connects with them. And we develop empathy and organizational consciousness, which means that I am not an individual worker. I am a worker that is connected to everyone else in my environment. And when I display bullying behaviors, the dominoes fall, so to speak, and that impacts everyone. And so if my behavior is better, everyone's behavior is better, okay? And so we have to teach empathy so that we feel connected and understand how our colleagues feel when our behavior is both positive and negative, okay? So again, like I said, empathy is a skill that everybody can learn, okay? And I 100% believe that all of the skills that you need in your workplace, empathy is one of the top 5 skills needed that can be taught, okay? And so, of course, you can have workshop trainings on empathy and active listening, because those two things go hand in hand. Being able to understand and really hear someone, and then being able to put yourselves in their shoes, okay? So you can do workshop trainings and development, okay? But most workplaces, supervisors and leaders do not believe empathy is that important. We give it a lot of lip service, but to actually bring someone in to help us learn empathy, we don't really do that, which I think is 100% a mistake, okay? But you can practice empathy, and that can then rub off on other people. So you can actively listen, repeat back to people what's been said, okay? And you can empathize with them by hearing and confirming and believing what they're saying. And your colleagues can see that, okay? So if you're a leader in a meeting, you can role model empathy, which I believe is the best, is to see it in action by your supervisor who values that. So let's say, for example, I was your supervisee and you're my leader, okay? And I came to you in private and talked about workplace bullying, okay? And then you saw those things happen. So when we're meeting one-on-one, for you to be empathetic, you have to put yourselves in my shoes. You have to confirm and affirm what I'm saying to you and tell me how difficult that must be. Okay. You don't have to lie to me and tell me you're going to do anything. Okay. I don't want that, but I want to be heard that you believe what it is that I'm saying. And the other thing you can do when you're in a meeting and you're watching people yell at me, okay, you can step in and say to them, you know, I understand this is a very heated meeting. Okay. I'm wondering what it must be like for Jan to have 75% of her colleagues here raising their voice and alienating her and yelling at her. I wonder what that feels like, right? You don't have to pull me into it. You can just say something as little as that, as I wonder what that feels like. And then if it were me and I was the supervisor or the leader of that meeting, what I would say is, and from here on out, what we're going to, So how do you teach empathy in the workplace? Well, of course, you can have workshops and trainings and bring people in to teach your people those skills, okay, where you can role play and you can have different scenarios. Actual work scenarios is what I would recommend, where your people have to put themselves and be the victim of a workplace bullying or be the victim of sexual harassment, and then try to tell that story and have people listen to what it is they're saying. So there's a lot of activities that you can do to help and build empathy in the workplace through workshops and trainings and those sorts of things. But also leaders can role model, which I think is the best, to role model empathy in the workplace. So when somebody is saying something to them, they can listen attentively. They can do active listening and tell that person back what they heard. Okay. And the importance of attaching active listening with empathy is because what sometimes you think you've heard and what I've said don't match. But when you say, this is what I hear you saying, Jan, and I say, well, that's not what I said ABC, then you can confirm that you know exactly the experience I'm trying to portray to you. So role modeling empathy is key, okay? Because when your workers see you being empathetic, they will want to, over time, will mimic that behavior. But if you're a supervisor and you're a leader and you're being a bully, they're also going to want to mimic that. So when you're a leader and a supervisor, really the choice is up to you. Do you want people to mimic bad behavior, or do you want people to look at you and mimic positive and good behavior? Okay. The other thing too is, one of the things when it comes to empathy is, in a workplace bullying situation, is of course holding the bully accountable, okay, and then helping the bully. It's not just that you hold them accountable, but you also want to help them see how their behavior is not just influencing the target, but it is impacting everyone in the organization. And so it's so important that we understand what empathy is. We put it high on our list in our organizational cultures as something that we value. And then we make sure that everyone in our workplace has empathy for not only their clients, but also for their colleagues. And when you have empathy in the workplace, you have a solid foundation for a healthy workplace, one that values workplace wellness, and one that is very strong and can combat bully culture. Thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.